Okay, now we're going to talk about chapter 7, part 5, the principles of design, unity and variety. And this is the final section of this chapter. So unity and variety go together, but we're going to break them up. So first we're going to talk about unity. Unity is when an image seems unified, that it gives the appearance or condition of oneness. When an artwork is unified, all the basic formal elements seem to belong together to create a coherent and harmonious whole, making us feel like any change in them would diminish the artwork's overall quality. So unity and variety, they kind of accumulate the whole of what we've been talking about in terms of the principles of design. So there are certain design decisions that can lead to unity. And some of these are if the image is a balanced composition. So when we talked about balance, we talked about determining what kind of balance something is and whether or not it's well balanced. So when you write about this and you're talking about a balanced composition and helping it be unified, you have to tell me what kind of balance the image uses and if that, how that image, you have to provide rationale and evidence how that image is well balanced. So like in this image, we have to decide, is this asymmetrical? Is this radial? Or is this absolute symmetry or bilateral symmetry? And once we determine that, then we have to like prove it's well balanced. So the way you prove something's well balanced, which can lead to unity, is by a repetition, an even distribution of a basic formal element throughout an entire image. So that can be a repetition of shapes or different kinds of lines or repetition of colors or color schemes or repetition of overlapping. I have it down here, but it should be up here. So like this image has a repetition of overlapping. And then when you say overlapping, there's a repetition of overlapping, then you have to describe that overlapping by providing direct evidence from the picture. So like, for example, all these frame pictures and all these posters on the wall, they overlap the wall. This chair placed in front of the wall, it overlaps the wall and the floor. This man overlaps the wall and the filing cabinet. The desk overlaps the man and the wall, etc., etc. So if you say, if you're providing these design decisions that make something unified, you have to like also provide concrete evidence taken directly from the image to support that. So something else that can lead to unity is if there's like a solid color, texture, or pattern in the background. So this has a solid color, blue, that goes all the way across the picture. It helps to unify it. Also has this solid band, which we know goes all the way across, of red. That helps to unify it. And this solid taupe colored floor goes all the way across the image, even though part of it's obstructed. So if you're looking at a landscape image, this is an interior image, it's not a landscape. If you're looking at a landscape or a city scene or something like that, you'll find a horizon line in that image that would run all the way across the image, and that horizon line can help unify it. Something else that can help unify it is if an image uses 1 or 2 point linear perspective. Now, some images it's more evident, like if you have a street scene or buildings or something. Others, it might be harder to determine. But this particular image, it uses 1-point linear perspective. My first clue is I'm looking at this desk. It's straight in front of me. And then the two sides go at these diagonals. So like if I follow this diagonal here, and I follow this diagonal here, the vanishing point is kind of somewhere around this man's face. I follow that vanishing point down to this chair right here. Both sides of the chair lead to that man. The filing cabinet, I follow that angle, it leads to that man. So this image, I can prove that it uses 1-point linear perspective because the front of objects are facing me straight on. And then the sides are like diagonal lines on the side are converging toward a single vanishing point. Something else that can lead to unity is if there's a row of objects that form a directional line across the image. So earlier in the semester, when we were first talking about directional line, I showed you an image, a drawing by Van Gogh of a little country street lined by trees, and the rows of trees and the rows of slats in the fence, those formed directional lines that ran at a diagonal but all the way across the image, and that helped unify that image. So if you have like a street scene with a row of buildings that go across, well, that can help unify that image as well. I think I mentioned this earlier, but maybe I didn't. Also, something that can unify it is like the color scheme. So like if you have a painting or a photograph or something that has a complementary color scheme, a predominantly complementary color scheme, well, that can unify it, or a predominantly analogous color scheme. That can unify it, or a warm and cool color scheme. This one has a warm and cool color scheme because we have the reds and the yellows and the oranges. Those are warm colors, and we have the blues and the greens, and those are cool colors. So that warm, cool color scheme helps to unify this image. The repetition of square and rectilinear shapes help to unify this image. The repetition of like small areas of dark values throughout help to unify this image. We look at these two images, one on the left and the right, and one of these is more unified than the other. And which seems more unified? Well, you're not here in front of me. So I'm going to tell you the one on the right seems more unified, in part because this is a well-balanced composition. We could say that it's radially balanced. Everything's like in a circle. They all like radiate and circle this central negative space right here. There's an even distribution of darks and lights throughout the image. There's a repetition of overlapping, but we look at this image is not unified because it's not well balanced. There's not an even distribution. Like this upper half of it has medium, light, and dark values. This lower half mostly only has light and medium values. So it's like kind of heavy on the upper part. So it's not well balanced, it's not unified. When we look at this Hokusai travelers caught in a sudden breeze at Ijiri, like what design decisions help to create unity in this image? I'll let you think about it in a minute. And I'm gonna have to answer for you because you're not here. Okay, so I'm gonna think about, like the easiest thing to think about is like what repeats over and over again. Well, for me, the suggestion of time and motion. It's suggested that the wind is blowing in the grass, the wind's blowing against this tree. These people are like struggling to keep their hats on because the wind's blowing so much. And this person, all their papers have been blown to the wind. So there's that repetition of the suggestion of time and motion. Lots and lots of things are moving. Then there is an analogous color scheme. It doesn't have like a wide range of colors in it, but it is analogous. So we see dark blues, light blues, and greens that are repeating throughout the majority of this image, and those help create unity. There's a horizon line that runs across this image. That's the horizon line. It helps to create unity. There's a repetition of overlapping that creates unity. There's a solid color in the background. It goes solid red across here, and then it's lighter, and then it's the blue here. So that goes all the way across the background, and it helps to unify it. There's a repetition of light values. This light value here, the light values on the paper, on the mountain, on the street, and in the ponds. Those help to unify the image. So when we look at an image, and what if everything was exactly the same in your life every single day? Well, I think with COVID-19 and social isolation, it's pretty much the same over and over and over and over and over again. You're not getting the spice of life. You're like just, you should be like mostly staying home and only going to the store to buy groceries. You should not be going to a bar. That would be the spice of life. But so like everything's the same. And when everything's the same, what happens? You are dying of boredom. So if everything is so unified in an image, everything is so much the same in an image, we're going to die of boredom. So we need what is known as an element of surprise. We need some variety in that image. Now, when we talk about, so variety counters unity through diversity, creates an element of surprise. But I want you to like get this into your head right now, because so many people have such a hard idea about this. I mean, hard time grasping this concept. When we talk about variety in terms of the principles of design, we are not talking about variety in the terms of it meaning a lot of things. Like if you go to the grocery store and whoever's sending you says, I want you to buy a variety of fruits and vegetables. Well, you're going to buy like some raspberries and blueberries and apples and watermelon and kale. I hope you're buying kale and mushrooms and onions and blah, 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 blah. You're buying a variety of things. You're buying a whole lot of different things, but I am not talking about that kind of variety right now. Please get that through your head. We are not talking about variety meaning a whole lot of different things. We are talking about variety that is created in an image by having one or two small areas of basic formal elements that are different than all the other basic formal elements in the image. So we're going to talk about this one image right here in terms of unity, and then we'll talk about it in terms of variety. So this image is unified in part because it is created using one-point linear perspective. That's helping to unify it. This image is unified because the sky, this color of the sky runs all the way across the picture. This image is unified because it's using an analogous color scheme of yellows, oranges, yellow greens, greens, all these colors have yellow in them. Even the brown has got yellow in it. This image is unified because it's like it appears that even though like the sidewalk is not moving, but our eyes move back in space. The people are walking and moving. The dog is moving. The clouds are moving. The water's moving. Like there's people walking over here. There's lots of suggestion of time and motion in this image. So all those things I just mentioned, all those directional lines, and there's a million directional lines, those all create unity. But now we got to find some things that are different. Some one or two basic formal elements that are different than all the rest. So as I said, the sidewalk's moving, the water's moving, the dog's moving, the people are moving, the clouds are moving. What's not moving? This man. This man is standing still and looking in the water. So this suggestion of stillness, that creates variety because it counters all these many, many instances of movement. Now, what else can create variety? I said that so slow. So we have lots and lots of greens, lots and lots of yellow greens, and lots of, we have like several instances of blue, like blue here, blue in the shadows, blue on the pants, blue in the sky, all these blues and greens and yellows, and all these browns. But what's different? What do we see that's not greens or yellows or blues or browns? We see a little bit of red back here. And those little bits of red, those create the element of surprise, and they create variety that counters the unifying elements of all the browns, yellow greens, greens, and blues that we see in this image. So let's go back to this image. What basic formal elements create variety? So we talked about there's a unity created by all the movement of the trees and the papers and the grass and the people grabbing their hats and getting pushed around by the wind. And we look at this, but what's not moving? What's still as can be? Back here, Mount Fuji, this mountain, these two mountains, they're not moving. There's the suggestion of stillness. So there's lots of suggestion of movement, and then there's just one or two little areas where nothing's moving, and that creates variety. So now we talked about all of these analogous colors related to like blue. So there's the blues and the light blues and the dark blues and the dark green grass and so like there's all, and there's like a lot of brown. There's not a lot of brown, but there's brown. So all of those cool colors, we see a lot of cool colors. All those cool colors create unity. But what we don't see so much of are these warm colors. So there's the warm colors, a band across the sky, and there's the warm colors of the pink tint, the red tinted hats, the pinks. And that pink creates variety. So let's move on to another image. So let's look at this image. What creates unity here? Well, one, this is radially balanced. We know that where this woman is the central point, and all these objects and clouds are encircling it, radiating off of it. That's one thing. And then the background, the clouds and the sky, they go all the way across the background. And that creates unity. There is a repetition of desaturated colors. There's blue, light blue. There's the grays and the browns and the gray and the like kind of yellowy, orangey brown here and the color of her skin. These are all these colors are desaturated. And there's a repetition of overlapping. And these like directional lines are created by these rows and the rows encircling the woman. So what counters all those things I just mentioned? Well, I talked about desaturated colors, dark greens and green tones and whatever color this bird is and all these desaturated colors. But when we look at it, where do you see a saturated hue? Here in the light of the candle. So the desaturated colors that I just described, those create unity. That saturated hue of the candle, that creates variety. So then I said, like, there's all these directional lines. There's directional lines created by the flow of these objects around this woman, where the clouds lead to objects. Those are directional lines. Where this is encircled, that's a directional line that goes all the way around. So what is a kind of line that we don't see very much of? We see a line of sight. Oh, we see two of them. Two lines of sight, as opposed to this multitude of directional lines. And also we could say there's a lot of implied lines where the bird points at the picture. The leaves point in different directions. The candle points up, the glove points this way. The corner of the paper points toward the key points toward the bird. But there's only two lines of sight. So the two lines of sight create that variety to counter all the implied lines, all the directional lines. The saturated hue of yellow creates variety to counter the unity created by all the many desaturated blues and greens and browns and yellowish, brownish, tinty, whatever that is. So now we're going to look at this picture, and we're going to talk about this picture in a lot of different ways. First of all, what sort of balance does this picture use? I am going to say that it uses radial balance. And I'm going to say this man right here is the central point, because if we look in this direction, we see the guy on the horse and the woman. We look in this direction, we see the girl. We look in this direction, we see these guys loading the sugar cane. We look in this direction, we see this guy. We see the edge of the porch, and then we see the perspective here. He's not the vanishing point, by the way. The vanishing point is up here. But everything, we look in this direction, we see the guys cutting the sugar cane. So everything is sort of encircles this man. So we say this uses radial balance. And to prove that it uses radial balance, we start picking out, to prove that it uses any kind of balance and its balance, we start finding things that repeat, rhythm and repetition. So we find that the light values repeat, creating a rhythm that our eyes can follow. So the light values repeat on the columns, on this lazy guy's clothes, on the color of the dogs, on the white and off-white clothing that the workers are wearing. So we see those light values throughout the entire image, and they create, the repetition of those light values create a rhythm that our eyes can follow. Then we talk about proportion, proper proportion. And when we look at people, like we're going to look at this guy, and to do all the individual features of this guy look properly proportioned. Well, in my mind, they don't. Like, his arms almost seem too long for the length of his lower torso. Like, his waist goes halfway down. So his arms and legs don't seem, to me, they don't really feel proportionate to his torso. And his neck seems kind of thick, and his head seems kind of like big in relationship to his height. So I feel like some of his proportions have been exaggerated. They're disproportionate. And then I look at this guy in relationship to all the other people in the image, and I have to like bear in mind that some people are up close, like they're the closest, and then he's slightly further away, and they're a little further away, and then he's further away, and they're even further away. So when I look at this guy in relationship to all these people, they all seem proportionate to one another, because some are viewed up close and some are viewed further away. When I talk about things in terms of comparative proportion, there's comparatively many more analogous colors related to blue than, related to yellow than there are related to red. So I'm going to look at these colors. I see like the yellowish tint and the orangish yellow colors of the man's boots, and the yellowish browns in here, and the dark green shades, and the blue green tints, and the yellow green and green tints of the grass, and the yellow sombreros, and the yellow baskets. So there's a lot of analogous colors related to the color yellow, but comparatively, there are very few colors that are strictly related to the color red. Because although there's some red oranges, there's more like yellow greens and greens and stuff. So comparatively, there's more of that. Comparatively, there's more round and curved shapes than there are square shapes. There's like the only evidence of squares in this that we see in the fronts of the building. There are like this directional line right here, this big one, long one, in terms of size, it runs from this part of the sugar cane as it goes from the leaf across the man's back to this man, boy right here. That's a really long directional line. But if I look at this directional line that goes from the rope along the sugar cane to that man's leg, that's comparatively a really short directional line. If I look at this in terms of comparing desaturated colors to saturated colors, there are many instances of desaturated colors, from the browns to the blue-green tints to the like reddish brown of the rock, and the dark green shades, and the just grayish brown here, and the colors of their uniform. So there's like a ton of desaturated colors. And I really honestly only see one saturated color, maybe two, and that would be this blue. Not even all the blue, but some of this blue back here is saturated. And I would say that this kid's belt, it's like reddish orange, it's saturated, but I don't see any other instances of saturated color in this. Then when we talk about, let's talk about focal point and emphasis. What is the focal point of this image? And it's hard to say, but I'm gonna say the focal point of the image is this man right here, because we determine that he's the central point where everything radiates off of. And I'm gonna say he is the focal point, because this line of backs leads to him. This directional line from the porch leads to him. He's kind of a dark value. He's highlighted by the light value of the column, but also the column has directional lines that lead to him. The grass has directional lines that lead to him. The sky's width is a directional line that leads straight to him. So there's a lot of stuff, everything is like encircling him, all these yellows that encircle him. This is the guy on that leads him. The guy on the porch kind of looks back at him, creates a line of sight there. So I'm going to say he is the focal point, although you could debate this. And then we are going to talk about, so when we were talking about comparative proportion, something I mentioned also applies to unity and variety. We talked about there's a lot of analogous colors relating to yellows. All of these colors, we could also say they relate to blue. All of these colors relate to like yellow greens and blue greens and greens. Those are all related to blue. But then we can also say this is an analogous color scheme related to yellow, because the blue greens have yellow and the oranges have yellow and the dark greens have yellow. All these have yellow in them. But when we look, so there's all these analogous color schemes, but when we look, what creates variety? Because all those analogous color schemes create unity. And so I'm going to say, like, the red of the porch creates variety. Now, there's also a ton of movement in this. Everybody's moving. The guy's pointing. The guys are carrying loads and tying loads. The kid's walking. The woman's picking. These guys are cutting the sugar cane. But then there's just a few instances of stillness. Even this guy is moving in his hammock there. The dog's sitting still watching those guys. The dogs are sleeping. They're not moving. This little girl's patiently waiting. This guy's, oh brother, there's my phone. This guy is sitting here watching. So that there's more movement than stillness in this. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 7. And how'd you like my quacking phone sound there? Nice end to the video, Miss Secor. And now if only I could figure out how to stop the